I will never forget that evening, April 27th, the day that split my life in two. My name is Margaret Maggie Lawson. I am 57 years old, and for the past 32 years I have worked as an attorney specializing in domestic violence cases. I have defended hundreds of women. I have seen bruises hidden under layers of foundation. I have heard abusers justify the unforgivable. I knew every sign, every stage, every tactic. But that evening I realized, nothing could have prepared me for witnessing violence against my own daughter. Emily invited me for dinner. Just an ordinary family evening at the apartment she shared with her husband. Nothing special, just to support her mother. Today marked 2 years since the death of my Robert, her father. I arrived around 7 in the evening. Richard, her husband, opened the door with a wide smile. As always, perfectly groomed, wearing an expensive shirt, his manners impeccable. Emily was standing by the stove. When she turned, I noticed it immediately, her pale face, the dark circles under her eyes. She smiled, but the smile never reached her eyes. "Mom, hi. I'm so glad you came." She hugged me and I felt her hands trembling. At the table already sat Barbara Sterling, Richard's mother. A large woman in her 60s with cold gray eyes and thin lips. "Miss Lawson, good evening," she nodded without getting up. We sat down. Emily poured water into the glasses and I noticed her fingers shaking. "But before we continue, tell us which city you are from. It is important for us to know where our stories reach." Richard was talking about work and Barbara added approving comments. And I could not take my eyes off my daughter. She barely ate. She sat hunched over as if trying to make herself smaller. "You look unwell. Maybe you should see a doctor," I finally said. "Mom, it's fine, I just—" "Emily looks perfectly fine," Richard cut her off sharply, giving her a warning look. "Right, darling?" Emily nodded, lowering her gaze. At that moment she reached for the pitcher of water. Her hand trembled. The pitcher swayed. One drop, just one drop, fell onto the tablecloth near Richard's plate. Time seemed to stop. Richard slowly lifted his gaze. His face froze in cold fury. "Are you serious?" he said quietly. "Richard, I'm sorry, I didn't mean." "Can't you even pour water properly?" He stood up from the table. "Are you capable of anything at all? What happened next I will never be able to forget." He hit her. Across the face. Then again. And again. 3 blows. Emily fell to her knees, covering her face with her hands, quietly sobbing. And I sat there paralyzed by shock. Then I heard a sound that made me nauseous. Applause. Barbara was slowly clapping her hands with a pleased smile. "That's right, son. Well done." Her voice was calm. "That's how she will learn to behave properly. I told you, sometimes a woman needs a firm hand." A strange calm washed over me. The cold calm of a professional. Decades of work clicked into place in 1 second. Silently, I took out my phone and hid it under the napkin. I started recording. "Richard," my voice sounded steady, "what did you just do?" He turned surprised. "Ms. Lawson, you don't understand. Emily is always so clumsy. You just beat my daughter. In front of me." Barbara scoffed. "Beat? Stop dramatizing. A couple of slaps are normal in family life. You raised Emily too softly, that's why she does not know her place." Her place. I looked at this woman. And what is a person's place in a family, in your opinion? "The place of an obedient wife who knows when to keep quiet," she smiled. I took out my phone. Everything had been recorded. "You know what, Mrs. Sterling? I have worked as a domestic violence attorney for 32 years. And people like you always get what they deserve." I dialed the number. "Captain Mark Reynolds. My contact at the police station." "Mark? This is Maggie Lawson. I need the police. Immediately. A domestic violence case. With evidence." I gave him the address. "Yes. My daughter." Hanging up, I helped Emily to her feet. "It's over, sweetheart. I'm here." The police arrived 12 minutes later. Richard and Barbara were taken away in handcuffs. He shouted something about connections and lawyers. She stayed silent, but her stare promised revenge. I took Emily home. And only then did she finally break down, sobbing uncontrollably as she told me the whole truth about her life with Richard. And I held her thinking, how did I not see it? How did I, who had defended so many women, fail to notice what was happening to my own daughter? But the worst was still ahead. What I later learned about the Sterling family shocked even me. This story turned out to be much deeper and much darker than I could have imagined. And it had all begun long before that cursed dinner. That night, when Emily finally fell asleep, exhausted by tears and fear, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of cold tea and scrolled through photos on my phone. Old pictures. From the days when we were truly happy. Here we are, the three of us, me, Robert, and little Emily at the beach. She must have been 5, building a sandcastle while Robert helped her, seriously discussing where the tower should go. Here is a family dinner. Emily is already 16, telling some story, waving her hands as she talks, and Robert and I are laughing. The Lawson family. We were a real family. Robert. God, how I miss that man. My husband, my rock, the father of our daughter. He worked as an engineer, skilled hands, a brilliant mind. But the most important thing was that he was kind. Truly kind, without pretense. I remember when Emily, as a teenager, came home with a failing grade in math. She was upset, afraid of our reaction. Robert sat her down, wrapped an arm around her, and said, a grade is just a number. What matters is that you tried. Let's figure out together where the problem is. And the two of them spent the whole evening solving problems. No yelling, no humiliation, no pressure. Robert and I never fought in front of our daughter. We rarely fought at all. We learned to talk, to listen, to compromise. There was no place for violence, cruelty, or insult in our home. Only respect, support, and love. Emily grew up in that atmosphere. She was a smart girl, curious, bright-eyed. She loved chemistry, could talk for hours about reactions, elements, formulas. Robert always said, our daughter is going to be a great scientist. And she did become one. She majored in chemistry, graduated summa cum laude, and got a job as a process chemist at a large company. Independent, successful, with a brilliant future ahead of her. I remember when she came running to us, glowing with her first bonus. Robert lifted her up like she was still a little girl and spun her around the kitchen. Here she is, my genius daughter. And I stood there thinking, I am so lucky. I have a wonderful family, a loving husband, a successful daughter. We often spent time together. On weekends, Emily would come over and the three of us cooked dinner. Robert made his signature lasagna, I baked pies, Emily set the table. Then we sat and talked about everything, work, plans, life. We were simply together. I could never have imagined how fast everything would fall apart. 2 years ago, Robert passed away. For Emily and me, it was a blow we struggled to recover from. Our little world shook and we learned to live again, just the two of us. But back then I had no idea that my husband's death would be only the beginning of a true nightmare. That without her father, without his protection and grounded wisdom, Emily would be left completely defenseless against a man who was already weaving his web around her. Because Richard entered her life not long before Robert passed. And to this day I am convinced, if my husband had lived, he would never have allowed what happened next. Emily met Richard at a corporate celebration 3 years ago. Her company was marking the successful completion of a major project, and she invited Robert and me to join. I remember that evening. An expensive restaurant, elegant guests, champagne. Emily introduced us to her colleagues, glowing with pride. The project was largely her achievement. And that was when I first saw him. Richard Sterling. He approached us with a glass of wine and a wide smile. Tall, athletic build, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. Dark hair neatly styled, an expensive watch on his wrist, the confident manner of a man used to success. Emily, I finally get to meet your parents, he said, extending a hand to Robert. Richard Sterling, Business Development Manager. Very nice to meet you. Your daughter is the real star of our company. Robert shook his hand, smiling. Robert Lawson. Glad to meet you. We are very proud of our Richard turned to me, took my hand politely and bowed his head slightly. Ms. Lawson, Emily has told me so much about you. You're an attorney, right? Very impressive career. Thank you, I smiled politely, though something inside me tightened. He was too perfect. Too polished, every word too precise, Every gesture too rehearsed, as if practiced in front of a mirror. And I noticed the way he looked at Emily. Not simply with interest. With a kind of ownership, as if he already considered her his. "Richard recently transferred to our office from New York," Emily said, clearly impressed. "He has an excellent education, graduated from a prestigious university, completed an internship abroad." You're embarrassing me," Richard laughed, but I could see he enjoyed the attention. "I just try to do my job." The whole evening he hovered around us, bringing Emily drinks, joking, telling stories. Robert seemed to find him a pleasant young man. But I could not shake the feeling of unease. After that evening, Emily began mentioning Richard more and more often. Richard helped with a report. Richard invited her to lunch to discuss a project. Richard gave her career advice. A month later she confessed they were dating. "Mom, he's wonderful," she glowed with happiness. "Attentive, smart, successful. He treats me like a queen. He brings me flowers, takes me to nice restaurants, always asks how I'm doing." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I hugged her. "Just don't rush things, all right? Get to know him better." "Mom, I already know him well enough. He's perfect." Perfect. She repeated that word constantly. Robert approved of Richard too. They met several times, went to football games, talked about work, cars, technology. Robert would say, "He's a good guy, Maggie. Educated, polite, solid job. Our M is lucky." But I continued to feel uneasy. Every time Richard visited us, I watched him. He was flawless. Too flawless. Like an actor playing the role of the perfect fiancé. One day I noticed how he cut Emily off while she was telling a story. He did it softly with a smile, but I saw how she immediately fell silent, shrinking a little. A minute later he turned his attention back to her and she lit up again. Control and reward. Classic manipulation. But I said nothing. What could I say? "Honey, I think your boyfriend is a manipulator, although I have no real evidence." He would have thought I was nitpicking. A year later Richard proposed. A grand, theatrical proposal at an expensive restaurant. Musicians, an enormous bouquet of roses, a diamond ring. Emily was over the moon. Robert and I congratulated them. He was genuinely happy. I pretended to be, but inside I felt cold. The wedding took place 6 months later. A beautiful ceremony, lots of guests, a luxurious reception. Emily looked radiant in her white dress. Richard appeared proud and satisfied. His mother, Barbara, sat in the front row with a stone-cold expression, occasionally nodding to guests. I danced with Robert and whispered, "Rob, I have a bad feeling about this marriage." "Maggie, you're just worried like any mother." He kissed my temple. "Our girl has grown up. She made her choice. We need to support her." He was right. But he was wrong about the most important part. Richard was not who he seemed. Behind the smile, behind the courtesy, behind the perfect manners, something dark was hiding. Dangerous. Pooh. I did not know then that behind that smile stood a monster. But I learned later. Far too late. Years later. When Emily finally gathered the courage to tell me the whole truth, from beginning to end. And this story, the story of their honeymoon, became a revelation for me. As everything started back then. With something tiny. With one innocent conversation. They went to Hawaii, to Maui. Richard booked a luxurious hotel, all-inclusive with a sea view. Emily sent me photos, happy, tanned, wearing a light summer dress against turquoise water. She wrote excited messages about how wonderful everything was, how attentive Richard was, how happy they were. I looked at those photos and rejoiced. We had lost Robert only a few months earlier, and seeing Emily happy was the best medicine for my grief. I thought, at least she can have something good. At least she can live her life fully. But I had no idea what happened on the 3rd day of their trip. They were having dinner at the hotel restaurant. A table on the terrace, candles, a soft ocean breeze, a romantic atmosphere. Emily was in high spirits. The vacation, the sun, the feeling of freedom and joy. A waiter approached their table. A young man of about 25, a local with a friendly smile. "Good evening. My name is Kai, I'll be your waiter tonight." He handed them the menus. "Is this your first time in Hawaii?" "Yes, the first." Emily smiled. "It's beautiful here." We're delighted. Oh, that's wonderful. If you ever need recommendations, just ask. I was born here. I know all the best spots, Kai said warmly. I can tell you about a great beach with almost no tourists. Or a local place with real Hawaiian food, not the tourist kind. Oh, that would be great. Emily brightened. And what dishes from your menu would you recommend? They talked for 5 minutes about food. Kai explained the local specialties, joked. Emily laughed. Just an ordinary conversation with a waiter. Light, easy, harmless. Richard sat in silence, his jaw tight, watching his wife with a cold stare. When Kai walked away to place their order, Emily turned to her husband with a smile. Honey, he's so nice. Maybe we really should visit that beach he mentioned. Nice. Richard's voice was quiet, but something dangerous in it made her pause. Emily did not understand at first. Well, yes, honey. He's a local, he knows. You were flirting with him. She blinked, confused. What? I was just talking. You were smiling at him, laughing at his jokes, looking at him like this. Richard leaned toward her across the table. We've been here 3 days, Emily. 3 days of our honeymoon. And you're batting your eyes at the first waiter you see. Richard, what are you talking about? I wasn't flirting with anyone. I just what? Just acting like you're not a married woman. His voice grew louder. Just forgetting your husband is sitting right next to you? Emily was confused. She truly did not understand what she was being accused of. That conversation with the waiter had seemed absolutely innocent to her. Honey, I was really just talking. I didn't mean to hurt you. Didn't mean to? He leaned back, crossing his arms. Do you know what hurts the most? That you don't even realize how inappropriate your behavior was. Is that how you acted with men before me? Smiles, giggles, flirting. No. Richard, that's not true. The dinner was ruined. Richard barely touched his food, answered in one-word replies, looked anywhere but at Emily. When Kai brought the dishes, Richard pointedly ignored him, and Emily was now afraid to even lift her eyes toward the waiter. When they returned to the room, Richard announced he was going to the bar. Alone. He left Emily by herself, crying, completely lost. She did not understand what had happened. How a simple conversation had turned into a scandal. Why her husband was so angry. Richard returned late at night. Emily had not slept, sitting on the bed, her eyes swollen from tears. Honey, I'm sorry, she approached him. If I really did something wrong, forgive me. I didn't mean to. Truly. Didn't mean to? He looked at her. Emily, you humiliated me today. In front of that guy. You acted as if I didn't exist. That's not true. I love only you. Then prove it. He sat on the edge of the bed. Apologize. Really apologize. And she apologized. All night long. Again and again. She reassured him she loved only him, that she would never look at another man, that he was the most important person in her life. Richard stayed silent, pretending to debate whether to forgive her. Only toward morning did he finally embrace her and say, All right, I forgive you. But don't ever do that again, okay? I get jealous because I love you. I don't want to share you with anyone. Emily was so grateful for his forgiveness that she was ready to do anything. The next day Richard woke up in a wonderful mood. As if nothing had happened. He took her shopping, bought her an expensive necklace, took her to the best restaurant. He was tender, attentive, loving. Forgive me for yesterday, he said that evening. I overreacted. I just love you so much and I'm afraid of losing you. You understand, right? Of course, honey, Emily hugged him. I love you too. The rest of the honeymoon was like a fairy tale. Richard was perfect. And Emily convinced herself that the argument had been just a misunderstanding. Little thing. A jealous man in love. Who hasn't seen that before? She did not realize she had just witnessed, and become the victim of, the classic cycle of abuse. Accusation. Humiliation. Demanding apologies for something she had not done. And then the honeymoon phase. Gifts, tenderness, apologies. So the victim feels relief, gratitude, attachment. When Emily told me this story much later, I listened and felt something inside me twisting in pain. I, a professional who knew every stage of abusive relationships, had failed to protect my own daughter. Because I did not know. Because Emily never told anyone about this episode. She thought it was nothing. A minor argument. But it was the first trap. And not the last. After the honeymoon, life seemed to return to normal. Emily went back to work, Richard too. They settled into their apartment, welcomed guests, made plans for the future. Everything looked perfect on the outside. But little by little, slowly and quietly, a cage began to form around Emily. The first victim was Sarah, her best friend from college. They had been friends for more than 10 years, studied together, searched for their first jobs together, shared secrets, supported each other. Sarah had been at the wedding, celebrating with everyone, hugging her friend, wishing her happiness. A month after the honeymoon, Emily called me, upset. "Mom, Sarah and I had a fight." "What happened, sweetheart?" I was surprised. "They never fought. She said strange things about Richard. That he's too controlling, that she doesn't like the way he talks to me." "Can you imagine? And how does he talk to you?" I grew alert. "Normally. Sarah just saw us discussing where to go for the weekend. Richard said we should visit his parents and I wanted to see you. We argued a little and he raised his voice." "So what happens, Mom?" "People argue. Emily." And Sarah started talking about red flags, told me to be careful, all that nonsense. "Richard said she's just jealous of our happiness." "He's probably right." I was worried. Sarah was smart, sensible. If she had noticed something concerning, it meant it was there. "Maybe you should listen to her? Sarah cares about you." "Mom, whose side are you on?" Emily's voice went cold. "Richard is my husband. The closest person I have. And Sarah, she just doesn't understand our relationship." After that conversation, Emily began seeing Sarah less often. First once a week, then once every 2 weeks, then once a month. And then she stopped seeing her altogether. Sarah called me once. "Ms. Lawson, I'm worried about Emily. She's changed. She's become quiet. She apologizes all the time. She asks Richard for permission for everything. This isn't normal." "I know, Sarah. I see it too. But she's an adult and I can't force her to do anything." "He's isolating her," Sarah said firmly. "First friends, then family. Classic abuser behavior." He was right. But Emily did not want to hear it. Next, Richard targeted her job. He started criticizing her schedule, her colleagues, her boss. "Why do you need to work so much?" he would say at dinner. "I earn enough for both of us. You could spend less time at the office and more time at home." "Honey, but I like my job," Emily answered carefully. "You like it? Or do you like your boss, Ian?" His voice turned cold. "You talk about him a lot." "Richard, he's my supervisor." "Of course I talk about him. Too much. And why are you staying late at work? Who are you staying with?" The interrogations began after every workday. "Who did you talk to? About what? Why did you smile at that guy from accounting? Why are you wearing that dress? It's too bright. Are you trying to get someone's attention?" Emily started wearing more modest clothes. Gray, beige, black. No bright colors. She stopped wearing makeup. Richard said she was beautiful enough without it, so why put it on unless it was for other men? She started coming home exactly at 6. Not a minute later. Because if she was even 15 minutes late, Richard would call her over and over, demanding explanations, accusing her of lying. But the worst was Barbara. Richard's mother lived in another part of the city. But 6 months after the wedding, she suddenly decided to move closer to her son. She bought an apartment in the building next to theirs. And began coming over every day. At first under the pretense of helping. Bringing soup, helping with cleaning, teaching her how to cook. Emily, raised to respect elders, could not refuse her mother-in-law. But Barbara did not help. She controlled. "You're washing the floor wrong, Emily. Do it like this." She would snatch the mop and demonstrate. "This soup is too salty. How did you even learn to cook? Did your mother teach you anything at all? That sweater doesn't suit you. Too tight. Respectable women don't dress like that." Emily tried to object, but Barbara knew how to pressure with authority. "I'm older, I'm more experienced, I know how a wife should behave. If you don't want to listen, your choice. But then don't complain that Richard is unhappy." And Richard truly became unhappy more and more often. If the soup was bad, Emily's fault. If the apartment was dusty, Emily's fault. If he was tired at work, Emily's fault for not creating enough comfort at home. Barbara was always on her son's side. Emily, you must understand, your husband works, he gets tired, he provides for the family. Your job is to make sure he comes home and relaxes. And what do? Argue, nag, I don't even know what else. But I work too. Emily tried to defend herself. Work? Barbara scoffed. A hobby. A real woman should be a homemaker. That's how I raised my husband. And he obeyed. I shuddered when Emily told me that phrase. Raised. Not loved, not supported, raised. Like a dog. Slowly, Emily's social circle shrank to Richard and Barbara. Friends were gone. Colleagues remained only out of necessity. Even I saw her less often. Richard always had a reason she could not visit. He had plans for the weekend, his mother invited her over, or he was simply tired and wanted to spend time with his wife. When we did see each other, Emily was quiet and tense. She smiled only out of politeness. I asked if everything was all right. She nodded. Everything is great, Mom. But I saw it. I saw how she had changed. How the light in her eyes had faded. How she slumped her shoulders as if trying to make herself smaller. How she flinched whenever her phone rang. It was Richard checking where she was. I tried to bring it up. Maybe you need help? A therapist, maybe. Why would I need a therapist? She was genuinely surprised. Everything is fine. Sweetheart, you don't look happy. I'm just tired, Mom. Work, home, Richard, his mother, a lot of things. But I'm managing. Managing. She repeated that word so often. As if trying to convince herself. The cage was being built slowly but steadily. Bar by bar. Restriction by restriction. And the worst part, Emily did not realize she was inside a cage. She thought this was normal. That this was how marriage was supposed to work. That if she just tried harder, Richard would finally be satisfied. But Richard was never satisfied. Because the problem was not Emily. The problem was him. His need to control, to dominate, to possess. And the cage grew tighter and tighter. Robert died 8 months after Emily's wedding. It was an ordinary Tuesday, nothing foreshadowed tragedy. He left for work in the morning, kissed me goodbye, said he would bring home my favorite cake in the evening. And 4 hours later the hospital called. A heart attack. A massive one. The doctors tried to save him, but they could not. My Robert was gone in minutes. I do not remember how I got to the hospital. I do not remember calling Emily. I remember only her scream over the phone and how we clung to each other in the hospital corridor. 2 women who had just lost the most important person in their lives. The following days passed in a fog. The funeral, the people, the condolences that drifted past unheard. Emily never left my side. Richard was there too, helping with arrangements, speaking with relatives. Back then I thought he was supporting us. Now I understand he was acting. After the funeral, Emily stayed with me. We could not be alone, we needed each other. Richard surprisingly did not object. The first 3 days he even visited, sat with us, remained quiet. But on the 4th day his patience ran out. I remember that evening. Emily and I were in the kitchen drinking tea, sorting through Robert's photos. We cried, we remembered, sometimes laughed through tears. Richard arrived, and his expression instantly tightened with irritation. Emily, it's time to go home, he said sharply. Honey, I want to stay with Mom a little longer. You've been here 4 days. We have our own home. It's time to return. Emily looked at me helplessly. I could see she was torn between wanting to stay and feeling obligated to obey her husband. Go. I squeezed her hand. Richard is right. You have your own life. I'll be fine. She left. And I remained alone in the empty apartment where every corner reminded me of Robert. In the weeks that followed, Emily called me every day. But she visited rarely. Richard always found a reason why she could not come. He had an important meeting and needed her at home. He was not feeling well and needed care. Or he simply wanted to spend the weekend with his wife. I understood he was distancing her from me. Using my grief and weakness to strengthen his control over Emily. While I mourned my husband, he built a wall between me and my daughter. Emily, meanwhile, was at her most vulnerable. She had lost her father. The man who had always protected her, supported her, believed in her. Only Richard remained. and she clung to him like a lifeline, not realizing that this lifeline was dragging her down. Richard began making new demands. Now Emily had to report every phone call, every penny spent, every minute spent outside their home. He checked her phone, read her messages, went through her call history. One day she came home 20 minutes late. She had stayed at work to finish an urgent report. He forgot to warn him. When she walked into the apartment, Richard was standing in the hallway. His face hard, his fists clenched. "Where were you?" His voice was quiet, which was far more frightening than shouting. "Honey, I'm sorry, I stayed late at work, I forgot to call." "Forgot?" He stepped toward her. "Or did you not want me to know where you really were?" "Richard, I really was at work. You can call Ian, he'll confirm." "Ian? Your boss." His voice grew louder. "You stayed with him again? Alone?" "There were a lot of people there. Not just us." "Don't lie to me." He grabbed her shoulders and shoved her hard. Emily was not expecting it. She lost balance and slammed into the wall. Pain shot down her spine, her vision dimmed. She slid to the floor, unable to believe what had just happened. Richard stood over her, breathing heavily, staring down at her. And there was no remorse in his eyes, only cold anger. "This is your fault," he said calmly. "You pushed me to this. If you behaved like a proper wife, this wouldn't have happened." He turned and slammed the bedroom door. Emily sat on the floor in the hallway, unable to move. Not from the pain, though her back hurt. From shock. Her husband had just pushed her, slammed her into a wall, and blamed her for it. She did not know how long she sat there. 10 minutes, an hour, she could not tell. Then she rose slowly, went to the bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror. Pale face, red eyes, a bruise on her shoulder that would be purple by morning. The next day Barbara arrived. As usual, without warning, using her key to their apartment. She came in and immediately noticed Emily was moving carefully, holding her back. "What happened to you?" she asked. I fell yesterday," Emily lied. "Fell?" Barbara narrowed her eyes, then smirked. "Or did Richard teach you how to behave?" Emily froze. So the mother-in-law knew. She understood exactly what had happened. It was an accident. An accident? Barbara sat down across from her. "Emily, don't play dumb. Men get nervous sometimes. It's normal. Your job is not to push them to it." She reached into her purse, pulled out a makeup bag and placed foundation, concealer, and powder on the table. "Tomorrow they'll ask questions at work. You need to cover the bruises. Here, I'll show you how to apply everything properly so no one will notice." Emily stared at the bottles of makeup, unable to believe it. Her mother-in-law was not condemning Richard, not protecting her, not advising her to seek help. She was teaching her how to hide the evidence of abuse. "Mrs. Sterling, but this is wrong." "Wrong?" Barbara shook her head. "Wrong is airing your dirty laundry in public. Wrong is complaining about your husband. Wrong is thinking you know better than he does. I was married for 30 years. I know what I'm talking about." She took a brush, dabbed it into foundation and carefully covered the bruise on Emily's shoulder. "There. Good as new. No one will ever know." Emily let her mother-in-law conceal the bruises. She sat silently, feeling dirty, humiliated, broken. And the most terrifying thing, she was beginning to believe it. To believe it was her fault. That she really had pushed Richard too far. That if she had been a better wife, this would not have happened. "She did not call me. Did not come over. Did not say a word. When we saw each other a week later, she wore a long-sleeved sweater even though it was warm outside. She said everything was fine, that she was just tired. I didn't know. I didn't see. I didn't suspect. And if I had known, could I have stopped what was starting? Or was it already too late?" From that moment, real hell began. After the first shove, something in their relationship broke completely. Richard realized he could use physical force without consequences. And Emily realized she had no one to turn to. Even her mother-in-law stood with the abuser. 3 months passed. 3 months of visible calm. Richard was polite, sometimes even gentle. He brought her flowers, apologized for what had happened, swore he would never lay a hand on her again. Emily wanted to believe him. desperately wanted to believe things would get better. But it was only the pause before the next cycle of violence. One evening, Emily came home tired. She had spent the whole day in the lab analyzing samples, writing reports. Richard was waiting with an irritated expression. Dinner was not ready, she had not had the time. He began with the usual accusations. You do not care about me. You are selfish. You think only about your career. Emily tried to explain, to apologize, but he did not listen. He simply walked over and hit her. With his fist. In the stomach. So hard she doubled over, unable to breathe. Then again. Across the face. She fell to the floor, covering her head with her hands. And he stood over her, repeating the same words. This is your fault, you pushed me to this, you deserved it. From that evening on, the beatings became regular. Once a week. Then twice. Then 3 times. For any reason. Soup too salty. Dishes not washed. The wrong tone of voice. A glance at another man. Richard always found a reason. Emily learned to anticipate his mood. She tried to be perfect. Cooked his favorite meals. Cleaned the apartment until it sparkled. Agreed with everything he said. But it did not help. Because the issue was not her behavior. The issue was his need to dominate, to humiliate, to inflict pain. Along with physical violence came humiliation. Richard called her stupid, useless, ugly. Said no one else would ever want her. That she should be grateful he married her at all. That without him she was nobody. One day he threatened to destroy her career. He had connections in the industry, influential acquaintances. He told her one phone call would be enough to get her fired and blacklisted. That no company would ever hire her again. If you try to leave, if you tell anyone, I will ruin you completely. His voice was calm, almost gentle. You will be left without a job, without money, without a reputation. Who would believe you? Everyone knows us as a happy couple. I'm a successful manager, respected. And you, just a hysterical woman making things up. Emily believed every word. Because by then she was so broken she could not resist. Barbara kept coming. And every time she saw new bruises, new marks, she did not react with anger or protection. Instead, she shared stories from her own marriage. My husband wasn't obedient at first, she said one day, sipping tea in Emily's kitchen. In the first years he argued, tried to insist on his own way. Had to train him. Train him. Emily whispered. Well, yes. Show who is in charge in the house. Sometimes put him in his place, sometimes just deprive him of something. Attention, food, money. Men are like children. You have to train them. She said it calmly, as if she were talking about training a dog rather than dealing with a human being. And then Emily understood. Barbara had been a tyrant herself. She tormented her husband, Richard's father. And she raised her son in the same pattern, only inverted. He became what she had once been. And where is your husband now? Emily asked. He died 11 years ago, Barbara waved dismissively. Fell down the stairs. A tragic accident. But something cold flickered in her eyes, and Emily suddenly wondered, was it really an accident? Or had Barbara helped him fall? The isolation became complete. Emily was not just pushed away from friends and family, she began avoiding people herself. She was ashamed of her bruises, her weakness, her inability to leave. She stopped answering her friends' calls. Avoided me, inventing excuses for why she could not visit. She looked at herself in the mirror and did not recognize the reflection. This was not the Emily who once laughed easily, built a career, dreamed about the future. This was a frightened, broken woman with dim eyes and slumped shoulders. A woman who no longer believed in herself. Work became her only refuge. There she could forget, bury herself in formulas and reactions, pretend to be normal. But even that was slowly being taken away. Richard demanded that she take days off, work less, refuse business trips. The control grew stronger each day. Emily thought about leaving. Sometimes, lying awake at night, she planned her escape. I will pack my things, go to Mom's, file for divorce. But then she remembered Richard's threats, his promises to destroy her life. And fear paralyzed her more effectively than any blow. Another year passed like this. A year of hell hidden behind the facade of a respectable family. Richard in public was a charming husband. Barbara, a caring mother-in-law. Emily, a quiet, obedient wife. No one saw what was happening behind closed doors. No one except me. I saw. But seeing and knowing are not the same thing. I saw changes in my daughter, but I did not know the cause. I suspected, but I could not prove anything. I tried talking to her, but she avoided answers. And then we came to that dinner again. The same one that started as an ordinary family evening and ended with an arrest. The dinner that revealed the whole truth and marked the beginning of the end of this nightmare. But the end was still far away. Ahead lay courts, threats, a dirty war, and terrible revelations. The Sterling family was not planning to give up easily. In the morning, Captain Mark Reynolds called. Richard and Barbara had been released under travel restrictions. No formal charges yet. An investigation was underway. I knew exactly what that meant. They had time to maneuver. Maggie, be careful, Mark warned. The Sterlings have connections. Not clean but powerful. They will try to pressure you. I'm ready, I said. But I was not ready. No one was ready for what came next. Because the Sterling family was not planning to surrender. They declared war on us. A dirty, vicious war where every tactic was acceptable. And that was only the beginning. The first blow came 3 days later. Emily's supervisor called and asked her to come in for a meeting. She went suspecting nothing. Returned an hour later, pale, hands shaking. They fired me, she whispered. Staff reduction. But I know it was him. Richard used his connections. I called the company's attorney trying to get answers. They politely explained it was a management decision. Nothing personal, she would receive compensation. Legally everything was clean. But I understood. This was revenge. The next day a blog appeared. Anonymous, but with detailed information about both of us. It claimed Emily was a hysterical liar slandering her wonderful husband. That I was a failed attorney who could not win cases honestly and therefore used dirty tactics. That we invented the story of abuse to extort money from the Sterling family. The articles were professional. With photos, with supposed statements from acquaintances, with arguments that sounded logical. Lies mixed with enough truth to look convincing. The blog spread quickly on social media. Under the posts appeared hundreds of comments, clearly purchased bots but looking like real people. They insulted us, threatened us, claimed women like us should be punished, that we were disgracing honest men. Emily's friends began unfollowing her on social media. Some sent careful messages saying they believed her but were afraid to get involved. Others simply disappeared. Sarah was the only one who called and offered help, but Emily did not want to pull her into this. I received messages too. Former colleagues asked whether the blog was true. Clients canceled appointments. A judge I had worked with for years hinted my reputation was in question. Then came official complaints. Someone filed a report to the tax authorities accusing me of tax evasion. The audit found no violations, but it drained time and nerves. The Bar Association received an anonymous complaint accusing me of ethical misconduct. Another investigation, more questioning. At the same time, the police received statements against both of us. Emily was accused of slander. I was accused of incitement and evidence fabrication. Absurd charges, but each required responses, procedures, time, and energy. Mark kept calling, warning me. Pressure from above was growing. Powerful people demanded the case against the Sterlings be closed. Claimed it was a family quarrel blown into a criminal case. That there was not enough basis for charges. Emily began receiving letters from Richard. They came through his lawyer, formal, printed on letterhead. In them he wrote about regret, about love, about how deeply he was sorry. He called her his only one, promised he would change, begged for another chance. The letters were crafted skillfully. Emotional but not threatening. Admission of guilt, but with caveats. Promises of therapy, change, growth. Classic manipulation designed to make the victim doubt. And Emily really did begin to doubt. It is typical. After escaping an abusive relationship, many victims go through a stage of uncertainty. They remember good moments, begin to think maybe things were not so bad. Maybe they were the ones at fault. Maybe he deserved another chance. Mom, what if he really changes? She asked one evening, rereading yet another letter. No, I sat next to her. This is manipulation. He is telling you exactly what you want to hear. But he says he'll go to therapy. Abusers often promise treatment. But statistics show only a very small number truly change. And only after long, serious therapy. Most return to the same behavior. What if he's one of the few who do change? I took her hands and looked her in the eyes. Sweetheart, even if there is 1 chance in 1,000 that he might change, are you willing to risk your life for that chance? He beat you, humiliated you, isolated you from everyone. That is not a mistake. That is a system. She stayed silent, and I could see fear and hope fighting inside her. Fear of going back to the violence and hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. The pressure grew every day. My law license was hanging by a thread. Emily could not find a new job. Her resume was rejected everywhere, and we suspected Richard was using his connections to block her. Money was running out. Our nerves were stretched thin. And the Sterling family kept attacking. Their lawyers filed counterclaims, demanded compensation for emotional damage, accused us of slander and extortion. Barbara gave interviews to friendly journalists, crying about how unjustly she had been accused, how her poor son suffered because of a malicious wife. One night, I sat in the kitchen going through another stack of documents, responses to complaints, court summonses, demands. Emily had finally fallen asleep after several sleepless nights. And I thought, maybe we really could lose this. They had money, connections, influence. We had only the truth and my phone recording. Was that enough? I looked at Robert's photo on the refrigerator. He smiled at me the way he always had, warm, believing. Rob, help us, I whispered. I don't know how to fight anymore. And as if in response to my prayer, everything changed the next day. The police station received an envelope, anonymous, with evidence that turned the entire case upside down. They almost broke us. Almost. But not completely. Mark called early in the morning. His voice was anxious, something I had never heard from this calm, battle-hardened captain. Maggie, come to the station. No. We received materials that change everything. I was there in 30 minutes. Mark led me into his office, closed the door, and placed the envelope on the desk. A plain brown envelope, no return address, only a postal stamp. It came last night. Inside is a flash drive with audio recordings and a letter. He played the first recording. I recognized the voices immediately, Richard and Barbara. They were speaking at her home, judging from the sound. They spoke calmly, casually, like people planning a weekend. Only their topics were very different. Mom, the lawyers say the case might go to court, Richard said. So what? We have enough connections to bury it. I know Judge Harrison personally, he'll help us. And if we can't bury it, then we'll discredit them both. We're already spreading dirt online, filed complaints. The main thing is to make Emily look unstable and her mother corrupt. No judge will trust their testimony. Emily says she's not coming back. She's demanding a divorce. Who cares what she demands? Write her emotional letters about regret. Women love pity. She'll soften, come back, and then you can continue her training. Just be careful. No witnesses. As I listened, rage surged through me. They talked about my daughter like she was an object. Discussed manipulation as casually as other people discuss weather. The next recording was even worse. Barbara speaking on the phone, apparently with a lawyer. No, they don't have serious evidence. One phone recording which we can contest. Will say Ms. Lawson edited it. She knows legal tricks, knows how to fabricate things. A voice on the other end said something. So what if you can hear hits? We'll say Emily fell and then she and her mother decided to profit off us. Not the first time someone tried to slander me. Pause. Yes, I know how to deal with witnesses. My husband once tried to file a complaint against me too. Told relatives I was hitting him. Thought someone would defend him. But I stopped it in time. A longer pause and then a sentence that made my blood run cold. I pushed him down the stairs. 11 years ago. Everyone thought it was an accident. An older man, weak heart, he slipped, it happens. I simply helped fate. And you know what? No one even suspected. So do not worry, we'll handle Maggie and Emily too. If necessary, radically. The recording ended. Mark turned off the player and looked at me. There are 3 more recordings. In each they discuss your destruction. Financially, professionally. And in one of them, Barbara directly says that if legal methods fail, she'll find other ways to get rid of you. I could not speak. I just sat there trying to process what I'd heard. Barbara had killed her husband 11 years ago. And now she was planning to destroy us. Who sent this? I finally managed to ask. Mark handed me the letter. It was written by hand in shaky, elderly handwriting. My name is Nicholas Sterling. I am Peter Sterling's cousin. Peter was Richard's father and Barbara's husband. For 11 years I have lived with this burden. For 11 years I have known the truth, that Barbara killed my cousin. He told me how she tormented him, humiliated him, hid him. The last time we spoke was 3 days before his death. He said he could not take it anymore and wanted to leave her. And 3 days later he was found dead at the bottom of the stairs. I suspected, but I could not prove it. I was afraid. Barbara has connections, influence, she knows how to manipulate people. And I am just a retired old man. Who would listen to me? But when I learned what she and her son were doing to Emily, when I saw how they were trying to destroy innocent people, I realized I could not stay silent any longer. I am 73 years old and I am no longer afraid. I made these recordings over the past 2 months. I visited Barbara, turned on a recorder in my pocket. She loves to talk, to brag about what she does when she believes no one can hear her. Especially after a couple of glasses of wine. Use these recordings. Punish them. For Peter, for Emily, for everyone they have broken. I have nothing left to lose. If Barbara learns it was me, so be it. The important thing is for the truth to come out. Nicholas Sterling. A phone number was written at the bottom. Mark had already checked. It was real. The man was real. And he truly was a relative of the Sterlings. We've already called him in for questioning, Mark said. He agreed to testify. With these recordings we can not only confirm the abuse charges, we can open a homicide case for the death 11 years ago. And the forensic analysis? They will claim the recordings are edited. They're already at the lab. But even without that, we have a witness who is willing to confirm every word. Nicholas Sterling is risking his life, but he wants justice. I sat there with tears running down my face. Tears of relief, gratitude, hope. A stranger, an elderly man, found the courage that so many others lacked. One man turned the whole case around. What happens now? I asked. Now we arrest Barbara on suspicion of murder. And we detain Richard again as an accomplice in threats and obstruction of justice. Their lawyers will not be able to do anything. The evidence is overwhelming. I called Emily and told her the news. She was silent for a few seconds, then quietly cried. So we're not alone. Someone helped us. Yes, sweetheart. Someone very brave helped us. That same day Barbara and Richard were arrested. This time without the possibility of bail. The charges were serious. Murder, complicity in the abuse, threats, planning a crime. Their influential friends began distancing themselves. No one wanted to be associated with murder suspects. The blog disappeared from the internet. Complaints against me were withdrawn. My reputation started to recover. And I thought of Nicholas, the man who had carried this truth for 11 years and finally found the strength to do what was right. Emily and I visited him a few days later. He lived in a small apartment on the outskirts, greeted us cautiously. Thank you, I said, taking his dry, wrinkled hand. You saved us. He shook his head. I only did what I should have done 11 years ago. Forgive me, my dear, he said to Emily. If I had spoken then, maybe you wouldn't have had to go through all this. You spoke now, Emily said softly. And that's what matters most. The truth always comes out. Sooner or later. And in our case it surfaced because of one man's courage. It seemed the worst was behind us. Barbara and Richard were under arrest. The investigation was underway, the evidence undeniable. We began to exhale, to return to life. Emily slowly recovered and I returned to work. Things were getting better. But Richard was not going to surrender so easily. It happened 3 weeks after their arrest. Richard was released under house arrest with an ankle monitor. His lawyers managed to negotiate it. He was forbidden from coming near us, leaving his apartment without permission or contacting us in any way. That night, I was meeting with a client. Emily stayed home alone. She already felt stronger, walked without fear, started smiling again. Life was returning. At 10:30, the neighbors called. They were shouting that they heard crashes coming from our apartment. Someone was smashing furniture. I ran to my car, dialing Emily's number as I went. She did not answer. I arrived 15 minutes later, the longest 15 minutes of my life. Police were already outside the building. They were dragging Richard out in handcuffs. His hair was wild, his eyes crazed, he was shouting incoherently. I rushed upstairs. The apartment was wrecked. Destroyed furniture, torn books, shattered dishes. Red paint on the walls spelling threats. You'll regret this. I'll find you. You're mine. Emily sat in the corner of the living room, hugging her knees. When I came in, she lifted her eyes and they held no fear. Only cold determination. He came in through the balcony, she said calmly. Tore off the monitor and came straight here. He screamed that I had ruined his life. Started smashing everything. I locked myself in the bathroom and called the police. He destroyed the whole apartment, but he didn't get to me. I hugged her, but she was barely trembling. Something had changed in her. Something important. Mom, I want to see him. At the detention center. Talk to him one last time. And why would you do that? I need to tell him everything. Everything I thought for the last 3 years. And close that chapter forever. 2 days later, we went to the detention facility. Richard had been transferred there after violating house arrest. Now he would not be released before trial. I sat behind the glass with Emily. He entered escorted by officers, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes, wearing a prison uniform. When he saw Emily, his face twisted. Sweetheart, forgive me," he began in a whining tone. "I didn't mean to, I just lost control. You know I love you." "Be quiet," her voice was cold and steady. "I didn't come to hear your excuses. I came to tell you the truth." He froze, stunned. "For 3 years you turned me into nothing. You told me I was stupid, useless, ugly. That no one would ever want me. That I should be grateful you even married me. And I believed you. Every word. You destroyed my confidence, took away my friends, isolated me from my family. You beat me and said it was my fault." Richard tried to interrupt, but she raised her hand. "But you know what? You were wrong. I'm not stupid. Not useless. Not ugly. I am a smart, talented woman worthy of love. And you are a coward. A miserable coward who can feel strong only by humiliating someone weaker." Her voice did not tremble. She spoke calmly, clearly, every word sharp and deliberate. "I filed for divorce. And I will testify against you in court. I will tell everything, every hit, every insult, every threat. And you will answer for it. Emily, please don't. You no longer have any power over me." She stood up. "None. You're just a man sitting in jail who will stay there for a long time. And I am free. Do you understand? Free from you, from fear, from everything you tried to break in me. And I will build a new life. Without you." We walked out without waiting for his answer. I watched Emily straighten her shoulders, lift her head. It was emotional liberation. Real, profound liberation from an abuser's power. The trials began 2 months later. Barbara was charged with the murder of her husband 11 years ago, with complicity in the abuse against Emily, with threats and planning a crime. Richard was charged with systematic domestic abuse, violating restrictions, threats, and property destruction. The process was long and exhausting. Emily had to tell her story in a full courtroom. She cried, but she did not break. She spoke firmly, cited facts, showed photos of bruises she had secretly taken. Nicholas Sterling gave detailed testimony about how Barbara tormented her husband. He provided recorded conversations with Peter, where Peter complained about his wife. Experts confirmed the authenticity of the audio. Richard tried to defend himself, saying Emily exaggerated, that he was just hot-tempered. But the evidence was overwhelming. Barbara stayed silent for most of the trial, only once saying, "I did what I believed was right." The verdict was announced on a cold November day. Richard, 5 years in prison, mandatory psychological therapy, and a lifetime restraining order barring him from approaching Emily. Barbara. 12 years for murder committed with particular cruelty, plus complicity in the abuse. When the judge read the verdict, I felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders. Emily gripped my hand and cried softly, tears of relief. We walked out of the courthouse to camera flashes. Journalists shouted questions, but we did not stop. We simply walked forward, holding each other toward a new life. Justice had prevailed. Finally. 2 years passed. 2 years during which our lives changed completely. Emily bought her own apartment. Small, bright, with large windows. She chose the furniture herself, painted the walls herself, decided which curtains to hang. Every decision was hers. Her free choice. She found a job 3 months after the trial. A new company, a different department, a fresh start. Her manager valued her professionalism, her colleagues welcomed her warmly. Slowly she became the Emily I remembered, confident, talented, with a spark in her eyes. And then Daniel entered her life. A general practitioner, calm, kind, soft-spoken, with attentive eyes. They met by chance. Emily visited him for a cold. They started talking. He invited her for coffee. She hesitated for a long time, afraid of new relationships. But Daniel turned out to be patient. He did not pressure her, did not demand anything, did not control her. He simply stayed close. Asked how she felt. Respected her boundaries. Supported her when things were difficult. For the first time in her life, Emily felt what healthy relationships should be. No fear, no control, no humiliation. Only mutual respect and care. When she introduced me to Daniel, I saw how she glowed next to him. With real, sincere happiness. And I understood she had healed. Not completely, the scars remained. But she learned to live with them and move forward. My law practice not only recovered, it flourished. After our story, dozens of women who had survived domestic violence began coming to me. They said our case inspired them to speak up, seek help, leave their abusers. I helped each one, pouring my heart into it. Because now it was not just a job. It was a mission. News kept coming from the prison. Barbara suffered a massive stroke 6 months after the verdict. The entire left side of her body was paralyzed and her speech was impaired. She will spend the rest of her sentence in the prison hospital, helpless and dependent on others. Sometimes justice arrives in the most unexpected ways. A year into his sentence, Richard sent a letter. This time without manipulation, without excuses. Just an admission. Emily, I am not asking for forgiveness because I do not deserve it. You were right about everything you told me at the detention center. I destroyed your life and almost destroyed you. Therapy helped me understand the damage I caused. But understanding does not erase what I have done. I hope you are happy. You deserve it. You always deserved it. I am sorry I realized it too late. Emily read the letter, put it in a drawer and left it there. She did not reply. She simply closed that chapter for good. And I began writing a book. Our story. A story about how domestic violence can happen in any family. How even a professional can fail to notice it in her own home. How important it is to speak, to ask for help, not to remain silent. And that there is always a way out. The book came out a year and a half later. Its title was The Lawyer's Daughter. Emily and I presented it together at the launch. She told her story without shame, proud that she had survived and won. Many women in the audience cried. Many came up afterward to thank her for her courage. Now, telling you this story, I want to say one thing. If you recognize yourself in these words, if your partner controls, humiliates, isolates, or hits you, know this. You are not alone. It is not your fault. You did not deserve this. And there is a way out. Domestic violence is not a family dispute. It is a crime. And you have the right to help, to protection, to a life without fear. Reach out to domestic violence shelters, call hotlines, go to the police station, seek attorneys. Talk to people you trust. Do not stay silent. Your life is precious and you deserve love, respect, and safety. Emily survived. I survived. And you can too. If this story touched your heart and you want to help us continue telling stories like this, click the super thanks button. It is the little heart with the $ sign under the video. Every time you do, You help us create stories that inspire and remind people of dignity and strength. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. Tell us in the comments which moment moved you the most. Was it Nicholas's bravery? Or the moment when Emily told Richard he no longer had any power over her? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss new stories about strength, dignity, and justice. Hit like if you believe every woman deserves a life without violence and fear. And before you go, watch the story we left for you here on the screen. We are sure it will make you think and inspire you too. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. And remember, you are never alone.